Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What is the United Nations International Labor Organization, and how does it focus on the dignity of work, which applies to everyone on the planet? My guest today is an expert on the ILO. Mr. Kevin Cassidy is director and representative to the Bretton Woods Multilateral Organizations in Canada of the International Labor Organization Office for the United States in Washington, D.C. Kevin Cassidy, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Hi, Bill. Good to be here today. Thank you for the invitation.
Kevin, let's just very briefly, what is your operation in DC as the representative to the Bretton Woods Multilateral Organizations for the International Labor Organization?
Bill, the ILO was created in 1919 at the end of World War One. And as such, in the establishment of the organization, we opened up three offices, one in Berlin, one in Paris to deal with the Versailles Peace Treaty agreements in which the ILO came into being in Article 13, and also in Washington, where the ILO held its first international conference. So the ILO office in Washington has a very special relationship with the US government, but also at the very beginning of multilateralism. Our job there is to work directly with the government, as well as with our social partners, which are the employers in the US Council for International Business and with the workers in the AFL-CIO.
Mhm. And of course, our viewers can go to your website at www.ilo.org. Now, the International Labor Organization, you have a wide range of issues you deal with. You deal with human trafficking, with labor standards, just on across the board. But you have four pillars that really undergird all of the activities and the issues that you deal with. What are those four pillars?
Bill, the four pillars, think of it as a construct that the four pillars of decent work hold up that house of decent work. So the first pillar are the international standards and norms. These are the conventions and the protocols that the ILO develops with member states. These are 187 governments around the world with the workers and employers sitting at the table as equals, deciding how are the rules of the road in the modern economy to be structured. This is everything from eliminating forced labor, child labor, as well as looking at employment creation, occupational safety and health, violence and harassment in the workplace, and everything that deals with global trade. So that's the framework of the normative structure. So it's like the red lights, green lights, the stop signs. It helps the flow of the economy move. The second pillar is on employment creation. Employment creation is obviously very important because as more people enter into the labor force, there have to be jobs available for people. This is how we buy goods and services, which keeps the economy going. So sometimes policies work effectively, other ones probably less so. And our job is to keep an eye on what works well in what economic development stature. The third pillar is called social dialogue. Now, social dialogue is about the communication between workers and employers to make sure that modern labor management relations is effective. Because if you have strikes or lockouts or other ways that stop the production, that doesn't help anyone. It stops the global supply chains, and hence we have an absence of goods. So having good dialogue between workers and employers to see what the wages are, what the conditions of work are, and how work is going to be structured in the future and in the future of work, what jobs will become redundant, and how do we reskill. The fourth pillar on that is called social protection. So think about that as social security and other social services. So social protection is a life cycle approach that looks at, say young children, they need nutritional assistance. It helps for proper brain functioning and growth. So it is about providing food and nutrition to children. It's about early education because we know that when children have a head start, they do better in school. So it is access to quality and affordable education. It is also looking at that transition within schools, going from a grammar school to a high school and looking at that transition from university to the workplace. How do we address that? So social protection looks at health, education. It also looks at unemployment insurance and pensions in our old age, something that a lot of people, especially those starting in their career, may not think about. But as you get to the end of your career, a pension is always a good thing. It allows you to be able to put food on the table for the rest of your life.
It certainly does. It becomes even more important at that stage in life, in all probability. When I mentioned in the opening dignity of work, how do you define dignity of work, and how does it tie in to a recent, I guess I'd call it a project or a program that you had in the United States and went around to it looks like just about every state out there, but we'll get to that in a moment. But how do you define that dignity of work?
So dignity at work is very important. It is a part of decent work. For the ILO, decent work is that we can freely source and find jobs that pay a good wage, a living wage, that has advancement and security for individuals. Dignity at work means that we respect those who are doing jobs. Whether you are, cleaning the streets from a snowstorm as a sanitation worker, that has dignity to it. And a mechanic who fixes the engines on airplanes. We don't think about it until, of course, the airplane is stuck on the tarmac and it doesn't get off the ground. The cleaning of the bathrooms at national historic sites. I mean, all of these jobs have to be done by somebody, and we should respect people who do that. It's not just for those who we give respect and credit to those people who do a good job, no matter what that job may be. This came out of the commemoration of the ILO centenary, which happened in 2019. And I really thought it was important to travel around the United States and to connect with workers to show them that work connects all of us, that no matter what level job you're doing, it does have dignity. And it also harkens back to the Martin Luther King statement that he made just before he was assassinated, where he talked about the sanitation workers' strike, that all labor has dignity. So no matter what job you do the job well, you put food on the table, you raise your family, you put your kids through school, and that you are a good neighbor and you're committing and contributing to society, that has dignity, and everyone has some form of self-worth. So work itself is the way in which we manifest that.
Now, today we're talking about your travels around the United States and interacting with a wide range of business people, with blue collar workers, with entrepreneurs, with just regular citizens, I guess you could say, and on across the board. But this could have happened in any country. It could have taken place in India, it could have been in China, it could have been in Bolivia, wherever it might be. But there is that link there between all workers, all 7.8 billion people on the planet who do some type of work.
Exactly. Whether you are a fisherman in Louisiana or a fisherman in Thailand, whether you are a shepherdess in Maine or a shepherd in Nepal, we are linked by that work. The work, for most people, gives us identity. It gives us form to our life. We get up every morning, we prepare ourselves for work, or every night we do that job. We contribute to society. We trade our skills, our talent, our industry, our time for a fair remuneration, which then goes back into the economy and then grows those societies. So it's really important to be able to link the work that people do all over the world. And this reduces barriers. This reduces the otherness. We are connected through the work that we do, through global supply chains, through the skills and talents that we develop, and of course, through the remunerations that we have to be able to build stronger and more resilient communities.
Mhm. Well, let's focus on, we got two areas we're going to focus on during this interview, and we're going to come back later in a couple of weeks and do another interview on the other two. But right now, let's talk about the health and wellness at work and focus on some of the, I guess, most salient moments or your major interventions with people at different levels as you went around the country. One that comes to mind is a woman who was in protective clothing in a laboratory. What exactly was that?
Yeah, this was fascinating. It was at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, and that's Megan Mears and Corey Taforo, and they're in an international biosafety training center. The reason that that's important, as we see with COVID, is that a pathogen that is in the society and then gets spread very quickly can quickly shut down the economy, lest people die from that disease. So the biosafety lab is looking and addressing at these pathogens and to create the cultures that are necessary for scientists to look at those cultures, to see how these viruses grow, and to be able to develop vaccines in order to combat that. As we've seen with COVID-19, nearly the entire world's economy had shut down. Most of us are locked down, and those who are lucky can distance work, but not everybody can distance work. And it's really interesting how the High social value, as in teachers or caregivers, are usually those who are poorly paid. So it puts the focus back on dignity at work, about how we need different people and how science and preparing for science. So the children who are in school who have a propensity to look at through microscopes and have an interest in microbiology and epidemiology, and the skills that they need to be the scientists that are developing the vaccines that will save millions, hundreds of millions of lives. So important, and we need that training. And Galveston was a wonderful example to show how that comes to fruition.
Mhm. And Kevin, when you were talking about that, that brought to mind about what COVID-19, and it brought to mind about the potential role of bat or a bat in perhaps creating this COVID-19 virus that has really ravaged the globe. But I think back to some conversations I've had with other folks and talking about bats, and we got a great photo of a bat that you took while you were on your travels. But bats often get a bad rap. They really are quite productive, and they're quite beneficial in general. I mean, there can be some side effects, but there are a lot of myths about bats and how detrimental they are to humans and to transferring rabies, which, as I understand, does not happen. So, how did you encounter that?
Yeah, this is the Austin Bat Refuge. You know, we had met with wonderful couple, Diane Osgard and Lee McKenzie, and these are, you know, two. One, Lee was a construction worker, and Diane worked in the government in Austin. And in the center of Austin, there's a bridge which, when it was built, it had a natural habitat for bats to cling to the undercarriage of the bridge, and it absorbs heat during the day and emanates heat at night. So it was very good for female bats in breeding. And at night, you know, hundreds of tourists will come down and watch this swarm of bats come out from underneath the bridge as they search for food. You know, bats don't carry rabies. I mean, they could be infected like anyone else. People are worried about bats biting them, but you know, if you stuck your finger in the mouth of a stray dog, the dog might bite you. So don't stick your finger in the face of a bat. It does have teeth, and it has to eat as well too. But bats are not you know, carrying diseases. They don't attack humans. It is not the vampire movies that people had seen. But Lee and Diane have been studying the bats, and they create this vivarium in their space to treat the bats, because some people afraid of the bats will hurt the bats, and then they will nurture them back to health. Now, Lee and Diane, when I spoke to them, such wonderful and humble people, and they're doing this all on a Social Security income. I mean, I really encourage people to support the Austin Bat Refuge. And when they were talking about the work, they said, you know, we didn't go for our master's degree and our PhDs, but scientists all over the world come speak to us because we have the practical knowledge. And that's also about the dignity of work, that you don't just have to go and get your PhD to be accepted, but by observation, by working with this, by really caring about these animals. Lee and Diane are the foremost experts on bats, and they can provide fertilizer. They can eat predators such as mosquitoes and other bugs that are eating foliage and other vegetables. And so bats can be very, very beneficial and prevent all of these fertilizers and other types of chemicals that are in the soil, that go into the ground table and then go into the water table. So I think, you know, if we were smart about this, we would look at that biodiversity, see how the natural rhythm of the planet, and bats have a place in that natural rhythm.
They certainly do. They're very important, and we need to learn more about bats. Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We'd invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved with a PBS or community access television station, or perhaps an educational institution that has an intra-campus television hookup, or you just have a computer, you have a website, you like our shows, you want to share them, please feel free to do so. Global Connections Television is provided at no cost as a public service to help us better understand international issues and how they impact our lives. Today, we're talking with Mr. Kevin Cassidy with the International Labor Organization. He is a director and representative to the Bretton Woods Multilateral Organizations and Canada of the International Labor Organization Office for the United States. Kevin, we've got another very interesting topic to cover, and that's climate change, green jobs, and biodiversity. Why don't we move into that? I know you shared some of your photos a moment ago with a swamp in Louisiana and a fellow who is an alligator whisperer. How does that tie into what we were talking, or what we're talking about right now?
Right. We visited Captain Tucker down in the Achachaya Basin. I believe I've got that right. And what Captain Tucker does is that he provides, fan boat rides into this swamp area, into the mangroves. And as you can see, there's a tremendous biodiversity in these areas of refuge for birds, for all sorts of animals, and for alligators as well too. And certain areas are no-go areas because people were hunting, unfortunately, the alligators to extinction. But there are new techniques now. So there are alligator farms that raise alligators from the wild, and then when they grow to a certain age, release them to the wild. I mean, some are obviously used for other means, but what Captain Tucker does is he gives you the experience of understanding the balance. So you're seeing all the different animals that make up the swamp down there in Louisiana, and how he has a special relationship with the alligators. I was really surprised. We were sitting and waiting, and he called out to the alligators in French. And was talking about the rich history of the Quebecois when they had come down to Louisiana many centuries ago. And he called over, and then three of these large alligators had come over, and he just reached his hand out and started petting the snout as if it was a family dog. I was absolutely shocked by this, but it was amazing. And he said that they know who he is, they see him all the time, and he is their protector. So he is maintaining that balance in this really delicate swamp, for a better word, or a mangrove that really does ensure that the brackish water and the clean water, that there is this buffer between the two, and it provides refuge to animals and well. So amazing work that is taking place. And again, he takes great pride in doing this for the last 25 years.
It's true. And it's been said, we've heard it many times, the Everglades swamp in Florida primarily is nothing but a river. It's a very shallow river, and it has a very finely balanced ecosystem there. And of course, we're disrupting it through well, industrialization, through building houses and that type of thing. I just got to ask you though, did he invite you or the members of your party to pet the alligator?
No, he did not. Thank goodness. I probably wouldn't have taken him up on the offer either, but
That would have been a wise move on your part.
I
I'm
think
sure.
so.
Well, we also, you provided a photo of solar plates, and we've seen where solar and wind have really come on like gangbusters over the last 5 years, really, and have now surpassed, I believe, coal as one of the largest energy suppliers, and much cheaper than coal. And of course, we see the scientists have said for decades now that we have to get off of fossil fuels, basically coal, oil, and gas, as soon as possible, ease out and bring in clean energy. Where did you encounter these solar panels, and what did you discover when talking about clean energy wherever this was?
Yeah, this was on Oahu in Hawaii. And as you can imagine, Hawaii is a very remote series of islands, basically 2,000 miles from the nearest landmass. And everything has to be imported or grown right there. So Hawaii is blessed with sunshine, many, many days of the year. I'm not sure if it's all year round because there are storms and so. But at this particular solar plant that was run by AES, what they're doing is they're taking advantage of the areas that are protected, so they can't be built upon. And the solar collectors are providing somewhere between 15 and 25% of electricity. And when there are major storms or the boats don't come in with the oil to use for electricity and the like, can provide up to 100%, I think, by 12 hours. Now, these are rather unique setup where they, in most of the solar fields and the vegetation is quite lush. And instead of cutting it with mowers that could damage the pylons that are holding these very sensitive panels that move with the sun, that they have goats and sheep that come onto the property and eat all of the vegetation. So it keeps the grass very low and doesn't block these solar panels from collecting sun. So you're using, again, a natural a lawnmower, as it were, to do the landscaping to make sure that the sun is generating electricity being stored in these very large batteries, which are housed in these shipping containers, which have been retrofitted to again, and thousands of batteries, collecting the energy from the sun all day, and then using that when it's needed into the grid. So it's an amazing public-private partnership in which it is not polluting the environment, keeping Hawaii beautiful and pristine, but also using natural techniques in order to maintain.
And solar energy is one of the alternate clean energy forms that many people have been talking about. I know you got to Kentucky, and we'll talk about Kentucky in just a moment. But East Kentucky, the mines are closing down in East Kentucky every day, and miners are losing their jobs, not primarily because of government action, but simply the market is putting them out of place. Coal is no longer competitive. It's high in carbon, and it's really contributing badly to climate change. But so many folks are looking at substituting a solar panel plant in East Kentucky, or having some other type of clean energy activity that really will produce more clean jobs, or more safe jobs, I should say, higher paying jobs. And of course, if you're working in a solar plant, you're not going to get black lung from being in a mine. So it's a win-win situation to move away from a pollutant like coal or even oil down the road. We can see oil's days are number two, without a doubt. But did they talk about that very much?
Yeah, we're moving towards a just transition, as we call it. The green
Right.
economy, or the greening of the economy. The coal and oil. I mean, it has propelled through the Industrial Revolution, has provided America with a tremendous opportunity to move forward. Now, I think that the science has progressed to a stage where we can now move on to less polluting industries. And I think, as you say rightly, that coal is waning and oil is waning, and wind, solar, wave, geothermal, biomass. There are so many different ways to generate the electricity that we need, and there are more ways coming as well too. And green jobs provide an opportunity for millions of jobs to replace those jobs that are being lost to oil. That oil and gas are fading out. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, we're going to see the benefits for our health. So, for example, if you're not in a polluted environment, then that people will have a better health. We've seen, for example, in India, when COVID-19 had first struck, the amazing pictures that came out of clear blue skies. Usually, Delhi would be very overcast with coal dust and other types of pollutants. And so when people are well, they can go to work, they can be more effective, they can be more productive. So actually having a clean environment actually does provide a wellness to the worker themselves, as well as a way for a higher paying job. Solar technology, wind technology, all of these require higher level skills and hence higher level pay. So there is a win-win scenario, but they have to be phased in a way that makes sense for the society.
Mhm. And it is a win-win situation. It's not a zero sum gain or loss. It certainly is. Well, before we run out of time, Kevin, I've got to talk. I got to put a plug in for my home state of Kentucky. I'm from Louisville originally. You were in Kentucky. You went around. You visited Louisville. You went to the Hillard and Brasby Bat Company. You went to Maker's Mark Distillery. You came to Frankfurt, the state capital. Give us a little overview of, in about 2 minutes or less, of your visit to Kentucky.
No, it was fascinating. I've never been to Kentucky, but the amazing people that I've met there. We went to Maker's Mark to see the operation there, and Roy Lee Wigington was generous enough to show us around and show us how they make a quality product. My cousin in England loves Maker's Mark. This was something that is a global brand now. We went to Spendthrift Farms to look at how they are raising these beautiful animals that are in racing. It's the home of Nashua and Seattle Slew. And Ned Toffee was very generous in his time in showing us around about how they're using modern techniques and sometimes very old techniques, to raise the best animals, and for the stud farm and which to create other animals. We were also in Ruth, the bourbon ball factory.
Rebecca
And
Ruth, yes.
Rebecca Ruth with Charles Boo and his wife, and really just seeing, a technique that has been used, by his grandmother way back when, a century ago, and still using and producing a great product on that. We were up in Louisville Slugger. Rick Redman, who was showing us around, brought us into the back vault. I had a great chance to hold a Mickey Mantle bat. I had to put on the batting glove because even the oil in your hand can change the texture of the wood. It was an absolutely fascinating time, and we even did go down to Cynthiana and met with met with Alex Barnett, who is a seventh generation farmer, where he's phasing out tobacco and growing hemp for CBD oil for pharmaceutical uses. And we also did make it to Sanders Cafe, the original home of Kentucky Fried Chicken. And Tina Brock was very gracious with her time as well.
It sounds like you you had the royal tour of the state of Kentucky. You hit all the high spots. The way you were holding that Hillerk and Bradstreet Louisville Slugger bat, I think you have another career coming up once you leave the International Labor Organization. But we're delighted you got to Kentucky, and it's interesting too. Kentucky is often, I think when people think about Kentucky, they think about farms or what have you, but there's a lot of industry in Kentucky, especially in the Louisville through Frankfort, Lexington axis. And especially in the bourbon industry, Kentucky produces 95% of all the bourbon in the world. Now, every state in the United States and many countries have their own distilleries, but still Kentucky produces 95%. And I believe about 60 to 70% of that is shipped overseas and sold in various venues around the world. So Kentucky's an international, well, it's really an international center, especially with Toyota Motor Corporation, with the Ford plant in Louisville, Toyota in Georgetown. So there are a lot of activities that are going on, but we'll have to catch up on those at a later date, Kevin. But Kevin Cassidy, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you very much, Bill. Always a pleasure.
I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.